Alright, welcome back. This is going to be your irregular preterite tense ending. So it's kind of just all the versions of irregular that we've kind of focused on the last module and a half, I want to say. I kind of started talking about this previously. This is just the last file that I opened up because I have all of your notes back up here for you, so ignore that page. I gave you the study guide, I think the beginning of last module, I don't remember, but it was called just the preterite tense study guide. I gave you what basic AR verb ending / rules usually are, and the giant importance of adding accents now when needed. And then down at the bottom, I told you what irregular verbs were and like the difference between those. So I'm just going to kind of reiterate, give you the video on it, right? My explanation of it, and then show you basically off of those two verbs that we had, two sets of verbs, 4 of them altogether that we had for that same module because it was like the intro to irregular verbs. So irregular verbs basically just mean that they don't like to follow rules. That's really all it is. There's nothing that special about them. They just break rules. So the two most often broken rules when it comes to preterite tenses are the accent rule and then the spelling root / stem spelling rule. And I'll kind of show you. You probably remember what it is if you remember it from class, but I'm going to still give you examples of it. So I'll even read exactly from here. Irregular verbs don't follow the usual preterite tense rules completely. The endings, those aren't touched. Those are still there. It's just that now the accents might not keep the original rule that they have to have. Similarly, the roots, which is basically the beginning of a word that isn't the ending, like the A-R, E-R, I-R, that usually is not touched. You only change the last 2 letters, right? The roots are changed, usually, when it comes to preterite, or irregular versions of the preterite tense. So, sadly, and I think I've mentioned this before too, some of the most commonly used verbs, they're called the super 7, truthfully, because we use them like super popular, or super frequently, I should say, are all irregular, which means that they like to break rules. So it's difficult just because the words that you're going to be using the most often are the ones that don't like to follow the easy spelling changes. So I guess the kind of good thing is that because you're going to see them so often and practice them so often, they're going to be easy to remember because you'll be like, that doesn't sound right, that doesn't look right, because you've seen it so much. But the most commonly used verbs are irregular. And not even just in preterite tense, usually in every tense. Like if a word is irregular, it will be irregular in all of your tenses. In the present tense, last year, this year in the preterite, if you do Spanish 3, in the future tense as well, they're going to still be irregular. So if it's marked as an irregular verb, stick with it because it's going to always be irregular. So usually, except the word for gustar, because gustar is a special case no matter what, they're always going to have, like I said, the same endings that we have been used to using for preterite tense, except gustar because that has like its own special concoction of spellings. So we'll start with those technically. Here, let me make this bigger. We have tener, and that's big enough, gustar. So the two rules that are usually broken when something is considered an irregular verb is that it's going to not follow the accent rule, and that can technically mean 2 things. It can be that it just doesn't have any single accents, as you can see here, or it can be that it has all of the accents, as you can see here. So obviously it's breaking the rule. Both of them are breaking the same rule, it just is breaking it in a different way. So, for example, for this tener, if you have a regular verb that you're practicing your spelling for, then you should have an accent on the E here for yourself and an accent on the O for an individual that's not you. In this case, that's not the case. So it breaks that one rule. Accent rule is not followed, right? The rule being put an accent here, put an accent here. This one says no thanks. It also breaks the rule. It's not so much as a rule, but like it's a label that most irregular verbs have. It is a stem changer. It likes to change the spelling of the original form in the verb that you see, and it doesn't follow it in the chart. Tener, if it was a normal verb, you would change the ER, put the necessary endings here, and keep the ten part. Now when it comes to tener, instead, stuff here ends up switching around. In this case, the TEN becomes a TUV, right? So it's a TUV across the board. So it breaks both of those rules. I call them rules, even though the second one's technically not a rule. It doesn't follow accent rules. It changes its spelling in the root. Or in the stem. They're both called the same thing. I call them stem changers, root changers. It's the same thing. Either way, it changes it in the rest of the word that shouldn't be touched to begin with. And if you remember, the net in the present tense in Spanish 1 was irregular because you don't say yo tengo, you say yo tengo, right? There's a G. Or tú tienes with an I. It was still a stem changer, so it's still the same thing. It's still irregular, right? The second one is gustar. This, I should probably just start with this one first because the others fit the same category as the net, but that's whatever. It's a different order. Gustar is irregular for basically the same two reasons, right? It doesn't follow the accent rules. It does have an accent here, and it also has an accent here, but so does everybody else in here. Even vosotros would have it, we just don't use it. So it doesn't follow the accent rules, because the accent rule is put one for yourself, put one for an individual, not to put everyone with an accent. So it breaks the accent rule. And technically it still breaks the stem changing rule, just because all of these are not changing the way that they should be changing, right? They're completely different spellings than what they should be in the beginning. So gustar is its own ball game just because it's completely different. It tends to just use the same spelling over and over and over. All you change is your DOP. Me, te, le, nos, and les. So the basic rules for irregular verbs are still followed by both of these verbs here. So you have querer, which means to want. You also have hacer, which you can kind of see the beginning of down here, which I'll talk about in a second, which still means to do or to make something. Both of these verbs are still irregular for the same reasons that tener, the first one that we did, was irregular. It does not follow the accent rule. If you notice, there are no accents at all when it comes to querer over here. And it's still a stem changer. Querer, the root, the stem, the part that should not be touched, is Q-U-E-R, not in the actual chart. And the rest of it is Q-U-I-S. It's a stem changer. Originally, if you remember querer back in Spanish 1, it was called a boot verb, like the shoe. Because querer became like quiero, where you put the letter I here in the middle, but you only did it for the boot shape. This entire row and this bottom one down here. That's not the case here, because actually, if you notice, all of them have, including the nosotros, Q-U-I-S. So it's still a stem changer. It's just not specifically a boot verb stem changer, because if it was a boot verb, you would only change it in the boot shape. And in this case, everyone needs to change it. So it's irregular for the same two reasons, right? Doesn't follow accent rules, because no one has accents now. And it's a stem changer. It changes the spelling of the original word. Same thing for hacer. Hacer means to do / make. I forgot to put the word make down here. Same idea. Hacer is still irregular because it breaks the same two rules. This is going to be like your mantra by the end of this lesson. It breaks the accent rule. There's no accents for yourself or the individual, and it's a stem changer. Original word is HAC for the stem or the root. In the chart, it changes to HIC. And again, it's a stem changer. I'm not calling it a boot verb, because if it was a boot, it would only change these four. And in this case, everything changes. So it still follows the same irregular rule-breaking ideas, right? Accent rules don't exactly exist for them. They don't follow them, at least. And usually they're going to be stem changers. Like most of the time, except like the gustar word, like I said, they're going to be stem changers. So quick mini review of what the irregular forms of preterite tense are. Hopefully they're relatively easy and you've gotten the hang of it with everything we've done with them the past module or so. But I'm still here to help you out if you need help on any of that. All right, I'll see you guys in class.